All right, today we're working on something a little bit different. We got a 2014 Ram 1500 and we are doing some rear brakes. We got rotors and pads to replace for my friend Trevor here, who neglects his truck. I'm just kidding. Who wears his stuff out, which everybody does and should. So first we got to start by taking the wheel off and then lifting this guy up in the air, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so we got to lift it up on a makeshift jack stand. Lug nuts are off. You might have to give her a kick. Yeah. Sometimes a bit of force. Here, just kind of do one of these. They stick on it when you don't use anti-seize on the back there. Yeah. It kind of corrodes itself to the hub. Also, this is what brakes look like. Just lay it on the ground if you want, and the wheel won't fall over. If it falls face down, you regret it. Okay, so now what we're going to do first is try to reset this caliper a little bit, because the piston's pushing out inside. There's a few different ways we can do that. One of the easiest ways is just to put a clamp on the front of the brake pad and basically pull the caliper forward. Once we've done that, because in this case we're actually changing the rotor and the pads, we have to take the whole caliper bracket off, which will mean that we have to take off the larger nuts back here, and this whole caliper bracket and the caliper will move right away from the rotor, and that'll let us get the rotor off the truck and replace it with new. So first thing we're going to do is get our clamp set up and try to squeeze that caliper back into position. Alright, so we've got this is a 6-inch C-clamp in position now, and I'm not sure if you guys can tell, but the space between the brake pad and the front of the caliper is actually increasing, which means we are retracting the piston inside the brake caliper. So it's not going to have to go stupid tight, but looks like it's back pretty well all the way. So I think we're good. We can take this clamp off now. So if you'd like to take that C-clamp right off. Now that's going to let this caliper now float, and we're going to be able to pull this bracket off without any troubles. So the next task is going to be those big bolts on the back. I think we're going to guess the size here. It's not a 22. Okay, so now we're working on the bracket for the caliper itself, and it is a 21 mil, and that's those large bolts we were talking about. So if the breaker bar is not going to be quite enough, we can use a ratchet. We can kind of put a pipe on it or whatever we have to do to sort of make it go. Right here? The big guy on the back there, yep. So you'll be pulling upward, I think, in this case. Yeah. My mind always gets spun around when I'm dealing with backwards bolts like this. Yeah. So I have to think about it. There's certainly no harm in that. So if it doesn't quite line up, we'll try the ratchet on there.
That's my feet are muddy.
Your feet are muddy? There we go. So the top one just broke loose. Now I'm just working on the bottom there. And for any of you who are in nicer climates where they don't use salt in the wintertime, you know, you can certainly appreciate having a clean vehicle, but here in southern Ontario, this is considered a clean vehicle. A little bit of surface rust, and that's pretty much right off the line. They're going to have that happening to them. So now both those bolts come right out, and then we deal with knocking out the brake pads and taking that caliper right off of the rotor. Alright, so the caliper is off and it's just sitting back on the sway bar there. So now we've got to worry about removing the caliper. Noticed a little keeper nut inside the stud, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. We're going to try to use the pry bar a little bit and see if we can't pop this off, but my suspicion is we're going to have to get a little bit angry and bust out the hammer and kind of give her a whack or something that way. So we can pry against the back of the caliper bracket and the rotor, because in this case we're not keeping the rotor. So if you want to try giving that a pull and see if it gets us anywhere, it'll probably be pretty stuck on there. I think we're going to have to use the hammer and knock it loose. Yeah, I'll get the hammer out. Alright, took a few straight blows with the sledgehammer, but she's now wiggling and ready to pop out, so certainly a good sign. Alrighty. So I think we're in the okay here. Those are his parking brake shoes. And you can tell by how much rust is in there how much they get used. So I think he said he's never used them even once since he's owned a truck and he bought it new. So if you look at the back side of the rotor, you can see there's some wear down on the edge. If we look really close, there is a lip there. The inside of the brake shoe, again, has never been used for the parking brake portion, but we're not going to be too worried about that today. So you can, on the face of the rotor, you can certainly see the damage from the hammer. So it took quite a bit of force to knock this loose, but what I like to do is coat the face of the hub with anti-seize, so then this doesn't have a chance to kind of rust weld itself together. We've got the new rotor, and we're going to hit it with brake clean on all the sides, wipe it down with a clean rag, and then we're going to get ready to install it after we start painting ourselves silver with some of that anti-seize. So let's get that cleaned up and go from here. So we got the anti-seize painted up on the hub, and we've got our rotor all cleaned up. So now we're going to stab that sucker on there. It might hang up a little bit on those brake shoes inside. Beautiful. No sweat. I mean, you could put that keeper nut back on if you want to. I see no harm in leaving it on there. Just watch the anti-seize on the stud now, because I did put a little bit on each stud for the wheel just to have them on there somewhere. If you want to push them on with needle nose, you can. It should slide on. You shouldn't have to rotate that, but actually I could probably use a socket, to be honest. The wheel will push it on also. So now we're going to worry about the caliper hiding back there. We're going to change out those pads, and we're going to get those new pads ready to roll. Okay, so we're going to pop these pads out now, and they should come out of the caliper without too much fuss. I mean, they may be a little bit stuck due to the rust in here that we're dealing with, but and I mean, a flat blade screwdriver is probably the best choice, so I'll just attack it with needle nose. I'll do it the hard way. So we ended up separating the slide bolts from the mounting bracket. They're just 10 mil. We actually used the impact gun because we already had everything apart. So holding it and trying to turn a manual wrench is a bit of a trick, but when you use the impact gun, it kind of has a bit of an easier way to hang on to it. So this is what we've got now. This is the back portion where the slider bolts bolt to, and then the pads should pop right out of here now and not give us any more troubles. Ha! Spoke too soon, didn't I? Okay. And we're going to change the metal brackets too. There we go. All right. So these should pop off. Okay, cool. So we got some new ones, some new metal brackets. We can just set the pads down. They'll be okay on the ground there. All right, so that just pushes back on. We might need to give it a little tap with the hammer to get them to seat. My fingers aren't quite strong enough to push them all the way on. Sweet. We've got one pad for the front or the outside. Just gotta roll the nose of them in, I think. The top fits tight with those. All right, we've got the new pads loaded back in the old bracket, the original bracket, and we can do this a few different ways. I think we'd be smart to first put the slide bolts and the bracket back together, mount it to the piston, and then once those are mounted together, we can mount the whole thing as one assembly up on top of the rotor. So let's go ahead and get that thing together. We've got our slide bolts ready and waiting. I can hold the piston here. All right, so we've got it back together now, and we're just gonna see if we've got enough clearance to fit that rotor.
We do not.
No? Okay, so we're gonna push that piston back a little bit further then is what's gonna happen next.
Mm-hmm.
So clean.
All right, we just got the caliper seated back on the rotor. We actually took it back apart, used the old brake pad to reset the piston the rest of the way. Didn't realize initially it didn't quite reset enough. I guess it would have reset enough to accommodate the original rotor, but because this rotor is worn down, the new rotor being a little bit thicker, of course it wouldn't fit back over there. Rather than force it, the right thing to do is to just reset that piston all the way. So now those 21 mil bolts get cranked back down like they were before. I mean, they seem super tight, but it's mostly Loctite. We'll be ready to put the wheel back on here, but first on the face of the brake, we're going to put a little bit of anti-seize to keep that wheel from sticking so bad like it did last time. And we should be in good position to do the other side. Alright, so now we've got her sitting back on the ground. We had a much quicker time with the passenger side, but that's because we had already done the driver's side first.